At a time when the administration seems unwilling to subject its war strategy to oversight by the Congress, we face the widespread use of private forces seemingly accountable to no effective system of oversight or law. While tens of thousands of these contractors provide logistical support services for the military, thousands are heavily armed private soldiers roaming Iraq. We do know that there are 48,000 employees of private military companies in Iraq alone. These forces work for U.S. companies like Blackwater, Triple Canopy, and DynCorp, as well as companies from across the globe. Some contractors make in a month what many active duty soldiers make in a year. Indeed, there are private contractors in Iraq who make more money than the Secretary of Defense or the commanding generals. The testimony about private contractors that I hear most often from active duty soldiers falls into two categories: resentment and envy. They ask what message their country is sending them. While many soldiers lack basic protective equipment, facts well known to this committee, they're in a war zone where they see the private soldiers. They whiz by in better vehicles, better armor, better weapons, wearing the corporate logo instead of the American flag, and pulling in much more money. They ask, are our lives worth less? Of course, there are many cases where contractors have hoarded the profits at the top, and money is not filtered down to the contractors on the ground or armor to protect them, and we can discuss that later. The second reaction I hear from active duty soldiers is that they see what they refer to as these rock star private contractors, and they want to be like them. So we have a phenomenon of soldiers leaving the active duty military to jump over to the private sector. There's now slang on the ground in Iraq for this jump. It's called going Blackwater. To put it bluntly, these private forces create a system where national duty is outbid by profits, and yet these forces are being used for mission-critical activities. Indeed, in January, General David Petraeus admitted that on his last tour in Iraq, he himself was protected by private contract security. Just as there's a double standard in pay, there's a double standard in the application of the law. Soldiers who commit crimes or acts of misconduct are prosecuted under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There have been some 64 courts-martial on murder-related charges alone in Iraq. Compare that to the lack of prosecution of contractors. Despite the fact that tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of contractors have gone in and out of Iraq since March of 2003, only 2 have faced any criminal prosecution. 2. One was a KBR employee alleged to have stabbed a co-worker in a kitchen. The other pled guilty to possession of child pornography images on his computer at Abu Ghraib prison. In 4 years, there have been no prosecutions for crimes against Iraqis committed by contractors, and not a single known prosecution of an armed contractor. That either means that we have tens of thousands of Boy Scouts working as armed contractors, or something is fundamentally wrong with the system. Brigadier General Carl Horst of the 1st Infantry Division became so outraged by contractor unaccountability that he began tracking contractor violence in Baghdad. In just 2 months, General Horst documented 12 cases of contractors shooting at civilians. That resulted in 6 deaths and 3 injuries, and that's just 2 months and 1 general. They have not been prosecuted under the UCMJ. They have not been prosecuted under U.S. civilian law. They have not been prosecuted under Iraqi law. U.S. contractors in Iraq reportedly have their own motto: what happens here today stays here today. That should be chilling to everyone who believes that warfare above all government functions must be subject to transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. These are forces operating in the name of the United States of America. Iraqis do not see contractors as separate from soldiers. Understandably, they see them all as the occupation. Contractor misconduct is viewed as American misconduct. While there's currently a debate in this Congress about how to hold these private forces accountable, the political will to act remains shockingly absent. Given the vast size of this private force spread across the most dangerous war zone in the world, it is not at all clear how effective oversight would work. We already know that auditors cannot visit many reconstruction sites because of security concerns. Journalists are locked in the green zone. The Army is stretched to the max. So what entity then is supposed to have the capacity or the ability to oversee the men who've been brought to Iraq to go where no one else will? Members of Congress tell me they've been stonewalled in attempts to gain detailed information about the activities of these private contractors. I think it's a disturbing commentary that I've received phone calls from members of Congress asking me for documents on the contractors and not the other way around. In the current discussion in the Congress on this issue, what is seldom discussed is how this system, The privatization of war has both encouraged and enabled the growth and creation of companies who've benefited and stand to gain even more from an escalation of the war. In closing, while I think this Congress needs to take urgent action on issues of oversight, accountability, and transparency of these private forces operating with our tax dollars and in the name of the United States, there's a deeper issue that often gets overlooked. This war contracting system has intimately linked corporate profits to an escalation of war and conflict. These companies have no incentive to decrease their footprint in the war zone and every incentive to increase it. As the country debates current and future Iraq policy, Congress owes it to the American people to take down the curtain of secrecy surrounding these shadow forces that often act in the name and on the payroll of the people of this country.